my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious
It has begun!
Calm down, Doctor. Now is not the time for fear.
All you do is behave.
Give them nothing, but take from them everything!
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we take the month's events in Geek and dissect them, analyze them, and occasionally laugh at them. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome day or night when you're listening to this. And we're going to have things a little sparse because this year is turning out to be a real complicated one. But I am being joined by the returning Shadow Blazer himself. Alex, how are you doing now that you are back on the interwebs and everybody can heavily scrutinize you? You know, you've spent so much quality time in that shadow dimension of yours.
I have. I've been deep in the shadow realm.
Deep, uncovering many secrets, as it would seem.
Yes.
But the actual concept here is, as I mentioned on a previous podcast where Rising Sun joined us, you had a little bit of a situation happen. Do you want to quickly explain what happened? I'm going to leave it up to you on that.
Yeah, I just figured it's my story. I should tell it.
Yeah. Plus, it's a podcast.
What happened?
This is like the perfect atmosphere to tell a story like that.
Yes. So what happened is back in April, I was at work. I just went on, clocked out for my lunch, decided to walk over to the store that's next door to ours, buy like a sandwich or something. Well, somehow, some way, because I'm a clumsy oaf, I guess, I tripped over my own 2 feet, landed pretty damn hard onto the sidewalk, fracturing my hip, breaking the femur. So that was
fun. It still doesn't sound good hearing it. It really doesn't.
It was. I was in a lot of pain when that happened. I did try standing up. You know, I've tripped over before. I've fallen down before. It's like usually it's just like, ow, I hurt myself, or I roll an ankle or something.
A little bit. You are a tall guy. Like you're what, a couple inches taller than me. So it's a long way to go down.
Yeah. So I figured it was probably just like, oh, I tripped and I hurt myself pretty hard at first. But when I tried standing up, it was so very painful. I was in a lot of pain. And, some bystanders who were right there just kind of came over, checked to see if I was okay. And they're like, you probably should just call 911 and have them come out and check you because, you know, I am a pretty slender person. Anybody who's seen me on camera can tell I'm very skinny. So
tall and skinny. So, not even in the NBA does it work.
No.
Injuries for people like I still remember hearing horror stories of like Mark Eaton, and he's a skinny dude at like 7 foot. I think he's 7'2" now, but he was 7'5" at the prime of his career. that shit, it hurts.
Yeah, it really hurt. So there was just absolutely no way I could stand up. My leg was just like stuck. I could not move it without being in a lot of pain. So ambulance came out. They loaded me up, took me to the hospital, had emergency surgery the same day. Was in the hospital for another 2 days, and then been home since. I'm recovering. I'm doing better now. I'm far more mobile than I was even just a month ago now. But I still got some ways to go to really regain my full mobility back.
Right.
But hopefully I'll be getting back to work soon enough as well.
Yeah. And there's a reason that I also had you kind of tell the story because like I've been trying to be a good friend and brother-in-law, and surgeries are not a fun prospect to tell anybody about. Like I was lucky in the fact that I had a knee surgery. Everybody and their pet duck has had a knee surgery. And so at that point, it's not that difficult to tell that stuff, but I've been very guarded about what to say, what not to say, primarily because it's your situation, and some people, like, they don't want to share too much on the internet. And so at that point, that's why I kind of kept it to myself. If people want to get mad at me for it in retrospect, you're more than welcome to, but this is just how I operate. In fact, there's some things there I actually didn't know. Like, I'd actually heard that it was your coworkers that had called 911 for you, not that you'd had some like random bystanders come up and go, "Oh yeah, by the way, you probably should do that."
Yeah. I'm the one who called because I was able to get my phone out of my pocket, thankfully.
Yeah, because
So-
like a lot of the situation when it was happening like live, me and Andrea were both working, I believe, that day, and so at that point, like, we were getting secondhand from, I think it was your dad, and it was just like, "Oh yeah, by the way, he's going to the hospital. Oh yeah, by the way, he's gonna have to have emergency surgery. Oh yeah, by the way, the surgery's happened." I was like, "Dude, hit the brakes for a second."
Yeah, it really did happen pretty fast. Probably in the
Yeah.
span of about 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
Went taken to the hospital, taken to surgery, out of surgery. Because the surgery itself was probably about an hour, hour and a half or so.
And for all the people that want to say, like, "You uncaring bastards, you weren't even there at the hospital with him." Well, first of all, we were working. Andrea came over, I think it was like at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, like right after because I remember she'd had a shitty day and she still wanted to go to the hospital to see you. And at that point, like, she was coming in at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I was with the kid. If I wasn't working, I was with the kids. And my kids in hospitals, that's not going to mix. So at that point, we don't want to complicate things for poor Alex in the hospital by bringing my kids in and having them panic. So I didn't even get to see you until the next day? Yeah, I think it was the following morning that I got to see you for like 30 minutes because I had to drop off my kids and then I had another appointment for work that same day. It was like, okay, yeah, well, he looks like he's okay, but wow, okay, he fractured his femur. Usually people can't walk after that, but
yeah,
that's how kind of effed up that whole situation has been. And as you've kind of pointed out, this happened way back in April, and we are recording this in June. That's how complicated this year has been, because not only did you have this accident happen out of the blue, but our buddy Brinton went and had surgery a month later. So,
right,
because he had to go and get his tonsils taken out and then immediately bounce into summer semester for his master's degree. So,
poor guy.
between that and your accident, and then my family, for some reason, has been recycling the same cold that eventually basically became a super cold by the end of it. We're still trying to get it out of our house for like 3 or 4 months. Yeah, this year's gonna be a little off, is all I'm saying, people.
I mean, crap's been going around my house too.
Yes.
Somewhere at kind of the end of April or start of May, I got sick with a cold and included both my parents, and now my parents got sick again. I'm fine actually now. I didn't get sick this time around, but both my parents have been sick
had to be
like
really
for over a week.
because like the shock of surgery, like that destroys you a little bit, and because like it's an invasion of your body, like that compromises your immune system, at least for a little bit. So we had to be really careful. And unfortunately, you didn't get the cold end; you got the super cold end by the time it hit your house. Because me and your dad are basically like joking. We're basically sharing the same symptoms right now. Except for yesterday, I topped him in a weird way, but. Yeah, so we're probably going to be playing a little bit of catch up, is what I'm saying here, boys and girls. But that's okay, because basically what happened was shit hit the fan in the internet, and so at that point we already had shit hitting our proverbial fans. We were off dealing with other things, is what I'm saying. So for those who were concerned about it, here is Alex. Alex is still alive. Alex is still on the internet. I actually love that one I think it was Rising said that was purporting that you basically wanted to retire from YouTube, but you didn't want to do the the dinky retirement YouTube message. And so that's why you had disappeared.
I don't know where you got that idea.
Alex, well, I think he was just creating it. I'm just like, but now that just makes me imagine like Alex trying to do the Matt Pat video, because like, you know that he retired, didn't you?
Yes.
So like, I'm imagining like Alex doing the Matt Pat video, where he retired for the final time, because he's technically retired like 3 times, and that is the funniest image in my head. I don't know why, but it really is. That being said, you actually have had quite a bit of downtime, Alex. So what have you been able to play and watch in the meantime while all this was going on?
Watch some anime, because a lot of new anime's been out for the season.
Okay. Has there been any major ones? Because I know some people were asking, like, if he's injured or whatever, is he watching this show? Is he watching? And I can't remember the titles off the top of my head, because everybody remembers the Japanese titles, and I never remember those. I can't keep track of those. I have to wait until they're English translated. So
some Japanese titles are hard to say. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of this season, or at least from stuff that had started out in the spring season, is about kind of close to wrapping up here. One is Sound Euphonium. That's the 3rd season. One's called Train to the End of the World, which is a very strange kind of high concept, weird anime, I guess. It's really bizarre. Okay. Another's called Girls Band Cry, which is actually by Toei, and it's all CGI, and it's nice looking, I gotta say.
Now, is all of this on Crunchyroll, or are you experimenting with other platforms?
All of them have been on Crunchyroll so far, yeah.
Yeah, because like I think somebody was asking if you had like High Dive or something like that, and I didn't know.
I did have High Dive.
Some streaming platforms with me, but we both have different Crunchyroll accounts. I know that much.
Yeah, I did actually have High Dive. I've had it for a while, but they recently revamped their whole website, and I just don't like it anymore. So I dropped my account.
Yeah, I think I noticed that too. And what was the other one I had? Verve was one for a while, but I don't even use that anymore. So
I don't even know if Verve's around anymore. I think they're dead.
Did they officially die?
I don't know.
I still get emails from my Verve account. It's so annoying.
Maybe they're still around. I thought they folded up, but let me check.
Because I still get the Viz one too. The Neon Alley, where it wasn't like a streaming platform, it was like a digital channel, and I haven't watched that in forever. So I love getting those emails, just like, oh, you could check this out. No, I can't. I have no interest in going to this place. But you,
Verve, Verve is dead.
Verve is officially
it closed last year.
Okay. So primarily you've been doing the animus. Have you been able to play any games at all?
Yeah, I did buy a brand new Neptunia game that just came out.
Okay.
Called V Revolution.
Be able to play some PS5 in there.
Yes, actually, well, funny enough, I first bought my new Neptunia for Switch, but it really chugged on the console. It wasn't great frame rate wise. It was really slow. And then I ran into a problem. I got to this specific dungeon, and then the game just kept crashing and crashing and crashing. And I'm just like, all right, that's it. I'm going to go buy the PS5 version now.
Was it a physical copy, or was it one of those cloud streaming games? Because that's the horror stories I've heard about that cloud streaming service that Switch runs off of for a lot of modern games is insane.
Not streaming, but not physical. It wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was digital download, actually.
Digital download, but maybe it was like the full thing, and it just doesn't work well on Switch.
Yeah, I just think it's not optimized for Switch, so I've gone to PS5 with it.
That's kind of one of the downsides right now of the Switch, is like you have to find the things that are optimized for it, and if not, you might as well it's actually more worthwhile to move some of those games over to PS4, PS5, or even Series S or X or Xbox One, just because like they're more competent platforms to be able to run stuff like that on. Because like Neptunia is like a hack and slash, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that game's gonna have some issues. I think the only hack and slash I've heard no bad things about is probably the Bayonetta games. But you know, those were developed in house, so you can't really
Mhm.
say anything on that. As for me, well, I've been fairly busy as well because I mean, obviously we've been trying to help you out. For those who don't know, it was kind of a process to get Alex into the recovery process because before then, you were living downstairs in your parents' place, and
Yeah.
so at that point, obviously, with your injury, it's not like stairs were doable anymore. So we basically had to help out with getting you upstairs and getting you basically re-roomed. I don't know if that's going to be a permanent thing, but we basically kind of helped out to as if it was a permanent thing. So you know, we obviously helped out with that, but then we also were able to try out a few games on our own, including the highly controversial Stellar Blade, to which at that point I have no problem telling you, Alex, I'm about 10 to 12 hours in. You should
Mhm.
probably check the game out, especially if you like the Neptunia games. You're probably more equipped to play it than I was because I'm having this weird deal where since it's a hack and slash, but it's built in the same vein as like a Souls game. And
Right. I had heard it was Souls-like, yeah.
so at that point, the problem that I've had is this is very difficult to explain because you never dealt with this during the PlayStation days. But basically, we have this weird translation problem happening between Western and Eastern studios on button configuration for those types of games.
All right, because like circles confirm and X's cancel, right?
Well, that was the
Is that what's
PlayStation
going?
problem. In this particular instance, Western Souls games or FromSoft Souls games as well, they would basically make the attack buttons R1 and R2, right?
Right.
Because that makes sense. You know, everything's on a trigger button now. But the way that Eastern studios are building those types of games, they are making, instead of R1 and R2 the attack buttons, they are making square and triangle those attack buttons because that's how it's been since the Devil May Cry days. And
Oh
so
yeah.
since
Okay.
I've been playing nothing but like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, I was so used to that configuration that when I picked up Stellar Blade, I was dying so many times because I would press the wrong attack button and it was driving me crazy. I was having like a really good boss run and then I'd press R2 to do my heavy attack. Oh shit, no, that's triangle and the boss has killed me.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I had that happen so many freaking times, but you're probably more equipped for that because I'm guessing Neptunia runs off of square and triangle being those buttons.
Yeah,
So at
that's
that
very
point,
similar to Neptunia. Yeah.
you're more equipped than I am because that's basically how like Devil May Cry games run. But I basically had to re-educate myself, and one of the ways I did it was I decided to go dig into the next Souls-like game that I hadn't tried yet, which is Neo. Neo is a Souls-like game that is made by Team Ninja, and they actually made it, but it's not because the Souls formula, you kind of know this already. The Souls formula has the games have a story, but it's not open and present. You have to go find it.
Right.
Through like books and little dialogue options and stuff like that. Whereas Team Ninja decided with Neo, we're going to make story the forefront of this kind of thing. It's just going to have Souls controls. And so at that point, it's been very helpful to help re-educate me to play two games that run like that. And then on top of that, I've also been digging more into Sonic Frontiers because we want, I don't know why, we got into a real Sonic kick, and Aria wanted to see more Sonic games, so we just decided to dig out Sonic Frontiers, and we literally played that for an entire day. And we enjoyed the hell out of it because it was just like we couldn't put it down. And and my oldest just loved every second of it. So there you go. And then I've also had a bit of a Mega Man kick, which I'm so happy to say now that my oldest daughter is now a Mega Man fan.
That's so cute.
Specifically, she likes the Battle Network iteration, which is the one that like the NT Warrior anime is based off of. We haven't tried to show her that yet, but she really loves like the battle system for Mega Man Battle Network, because I didn't really know this very well, but you probably didn't either. Instead of, because you've seen a traditional Mega Man game, they're run and gun. But Battle Network, they decided to go a different route. They decided to take Mega Man and make a JRPG out of it. And so it's a completely different grid-based battle system that my daughter just loves seeing Mega Man hop around the map and take out various enemies during that. She just can't get enough of that. So yeah, it's been very interesting, but we've had a couple of months, but you guys are more interested in what has happened because we officially have to put a couple of months in the books, and we're going to do this month by month because unfortunately enough crap happened throughout each month. We kind of have to do it that way. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. And so the biggest thing that we actually have to get into, I was hoping that we wouldn't, but this was the primary thing that has happened, not just for the month of March, but for a couple of other months too. I hate to tell you this, Alex, but we thought Gamergate was done. Apparently not, at least according to games journalists. Gamergate 2.0 is officially on the rise. And why is that the case? Well, the sparking moment that created all of this was that a company that is known for narrative consulting called Sweet Baby Inc. They actually had been working in the industry for a while. They actually worked on a number of big AAA projects. Specifically, the ones that are most notable were God of War Ragnarok, as well as Spider-Man 2, the Insomniac Spider-Man 2. They actually worked on the narrative consultancy for it, made sure that certain DEI elements were placed in those games. I cannot speak for Spider-Man 2. I still haven't hit it yet, but I know how they influenced God of War Ragnarok. They've been working in the industry for a while, but if people don't remember, games haven't been necessarily doing that well this year. We've had some games do fairly well in sales, but nothing go 100% gangbusters until Stellar Blade. And so at that point, a user on Steam by the name of Cabrutus Rambo decided to create a Steam curated group called Sweet Baby Inc. Detected, which was him basically pointing out all of the games that Sweet Baby Inc. had worked on, but not through any nefarious means. He actually got the games that he listed on that group from their website, because they had advertised that, oh yes, we had worked on this and this and this. In fact, one game that they worked on 2 years ago, I think it was called Goodbye Times from Volcano High. So that was on their website. Well, Sweet Baby Inc. didn't like the fact that he did that and decided to raise a stink with Steam. But that didn't work out because Steam basically said, we don't see the problem here. He's using the information from your own website that is publicly disclosed, not just by you, but also by the companies that you worked with them. And then they decided to do the stupid thing with, and this is when games journalists, because we love games journalists, right, Alex? I
don't really have problems. So.
Games journalists decided to join in on this because they decided we're going to go down the bigoted route, and decided to start attacking the guy based off of his being a white misogynist. And the funniest part about this whole thing is it turns out that he is a gamer from Brazil. when they started going about that. So they obviously couldn't do that anymore because he doesn't really fit the bigot demographic anymore, since he is from Brazil. And it basically became an online war that has now been labeled as Gamergate 2.0, involving a myriad of players, most of which are games journalists that are making absolute fools of themselves, one of which being Alyssa Mercante, who is a senior editor over at Kotaku, as well as Maya Felix Kramer. The reason I have to say two names is because, well, at one point they were Maya, now they are Felix Kramer. And they are also, or I believe they worked for Sweet Baby Inc. They no longer work there anymore. And of course, the one that I don't need to introduce to people from my channel, at least, is Chris Kindred, because that's the guy that the day after Akira Toriyama passed away, he decided to drop trowel on Akira Toriyama's grave. So I don't need to introduce him because Dragon Ball fans already kicked him to the curb as hard as they possibly could. So that's the sparking moment, is that this Steam curator group, Sweet Baby Inc. Detected, was created, and obviously Steam didn't see a problem because they were using publicly disclosed info, and it wasn't like the same people involved weren't already advertising that, yes, they worked on these games. And all Cabrutus Rombo wanted to do was put that out and say, oh yeah, by the way, this company that maybe you like and maybe you don't like worked on this game. That's it.
Okay, but then why... Something's not adding up, though, because then why would... If it's already public knowledge, why would Sweet Baby complain, though? I don't quite get it. Nothing's...
Because because the presumption is that he was doing it in order to point out all of the evil DEI and whatnot. And yes, he was, but he was basically pointing out what they were already saying, is they were working on these games, and he was letting gamers know that they worked on these games, but they were already doing it too. So in reality, much like the original Gamergate, Alex, people blew shit out of proportions. We could agree that happened in the previous Gamergate, right? Where a bunch of things were blown out of proportions. I personally believe that, a lot of people like to point out the original Gamergate was like, oh, we saw the gaming journalists for who they were because we got to see all of them at their Cool Kids table. Guys, we were seeing that years before Gamergate even happened. You just had to pay attention. I already knew, like, a myriad of reporters from Kotaku, Polygon, Games Radar. I think Games Radar was still around. Was around at that point. IGN. That I'm like, okay, this is obviously somebody who has an agenda, or somebody who is obviously favoring a particular indie gamer or indie game dev, something like that. And so I was already paying attention to that. But that's basically what's happening here. And ultimately, it's ended up being quite stupid because there's a couple of wonderful developments that have happened out of this, Alex, that maybe we can be proud of the internet for, at least a little bit. I know that we have a difficult time doing that. One is that immediately, like, when a big controversy happens on the internet, everybody's outraged, right?
Yes.
That didn't happen here. And I think primarily because everybody saw the shit show that was the first Gamergate, and they all just kind of, most of the internet just kind of looked at this and went, oh, well, you guys can go ahead and have your fun. I'm not even kidding. There were people that were up in arms on social media platforms because, of course, they're going to be up in arms on social media platforms. But the general consensus that I was getting, not just from people who follow my channel or listeners of the podcast, but people that I would talk to at work or people that I would talk to in average conversations, but they all just kind of went, well, I don't really trust games journalists anyway because they screwed up this review and I actually like the game. And so at that point, I was kind of proud of everybody, Alex, because nobody got up in arms. They just kind of went, oh, okay, well, this shit show's happening and we'll move on with our lives. So,
Yeah.
first of all, how do you feel about that? We got smarter. I don't know how it happened, but the internet got smarter.
That's good, because this is really kind of a dumb thing to get all worked up over. So.
Trust me. And it's only going to get worse because in April, it's all based around Stellar Blade. And so we'll have to go over that at some point. But the other thing that was really cool that happened out of this, and I'm more interested in highlighting it than highlighting the events of, basically Felix Kramer getting upset over people on Twitter calling out facts or whatnot, is the fact that through some of the, I'm not going to say conservative element, because frankly, a lot of them are actually pretty center. But some of the people that have been screaming out against DEI in the AAA gaming industry actually has encouraged really the game devs that we want to hear from. What do I mean by that? Because usually when a game is being unveiled, Alex, we're hearing from who? The art leads, the game directors, the executive producers of them. We don't really hear from the average 9-to-5 game dev who's just working for a paycheck.
Right.
And that's who we heard from this time. Because even though some of them couldn't come out openly because, their companies were involved. For example, one of the companies that's openly involved in all of this is Ubisoft. And that's primarily because Sweet Baby Inc. is working with them on their two biggest releases this year. They are working on Star Wars Outlaws, and they are also working on the recently announced Assassin's Creed Shadows. So obviously, Ubisoft is clamping down on anybody in their work environment talking about this at all. And we actually got to start hearing from those people, the 9-to-5ers, who were basically saying, we don't care about any of the controversies. We just want to make games. Can we please just make games? And two things ultimately happened out of that. One, a lot of those 9-to-5 game devs don't really care about the Sweet Baby Inc. people and actually go out of their way to not have to work with them. They instead go to their bosses. I like some of the stories that were happening with that one. They basically went, hey boss, do I actually have to do that? And the boss would either say yes, because they're Ubisoft or whatever, or they would say, no, just go and do your thing.
Yeah.
Right?
But I imagine that's going to be the case. If you're like a programmer, if you're like a mid-level programmer, if you're a bug tester or whatever, your job is not to worry about the consulting firm that's there to consult
especially
on the
if you're
story
like
elements.
If you're like the hardcore coder, you're not doing any of this stuff because you aren't even working with the art assets, so to speak. You're making sure that the gameplay engine works. And that's the beautiful thing. This is the people we finally heard from. And a lot of them were basically of the opinion, look, we hate this bullshit. We just want to make games. Can we just make games?
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit.
And that's fine. Because again, the kind of people that a company like a consulting firm like Sweet Baby will work with are going to be, well, your lead developer, your game director, your probably the art director, because for character design consulting.
They do technically, a lot of the people here, I was going to say, they actually do have a spot in the writing room. Because that's how Sweet Baby and also Silver Stream is another version of a narrative consultant. They have to have at least one person in their writing room. So that's primarily who they deal with, and usually through their own tactics, their own admissions at GDC, not mine. They also, if they don't like what the game director is saying, they then will go tattletale over to the marketing team or to the HR department, which can get those involved. But that's neither here nor there, because I'm not getting into the details here because it's not relevant to the 9-to-5 game devs who are just going there to work on this game. Kind of
right.
And ultimately, it's those 9-to-5 game developers that we really want to hear from, because, we keep on hearing about all these layoffs in the industry. Who's that affecting? them.
It's affecting all the the lower end of the of the poor totem pole. It is and it sucks. Yeah.
And more importantly, these are the same people that because you followed the Blizzard controversy, right? The all of the sexual harassment and all the stuff that was happening there. You remember seeing some of the documentation basically saying that some of those devs were living in their cars in the parking lot of the Blizzard campus?
Yes, I had heard that. Yeah.
That's the people that we're hearing from right now.
Yeah.
The people that got taken advantage of by Blizzard, by Activision, that's who I want to hear from, because that is as average Joe as you can get, and we don't get to hear from them because people like Todd Howard will shut them up in order to keep them, basically tell them to sit down, shut up, and get in line. And frankly, we are those people, Alex. We are those people in our regular everyday lives. And so people like Mark Kern, who I don't know if you remember this or not, but him and me didn't really get into a tiff, but we were in disagreement when it came to the Nostalrius situation with WoW, because he was a former game director on World of Warcraft. Like, he worked in the early days of WoW. And he was one of the guys that came out and basically said, if you have complaints with your employer or whatever, come talk to me and I'll speak for you, kind of thing. But here's the other thing that did happen out of this that I'm very happy about, because not only were these narrative consultancy firms called out by the regular everyday 9-to-5 devs, but also there's a recent position over the last few years that has been getting a lot of scrutiny, and that is community managers. Now, for those who don't know, community managers sometimes can work for the company. And by that, I mean they work on site. They are in the office. They are dealing with the administrative staff of that game or whatnot. A lot of the time, it's kind of like how YouTubers will hire moderators. They will just pick somebody and have them represent them, but to a point where it's very easy to just throw them under the bus. And a lot of community managers over the last few years have been this. And because of that, 9-to-5 game devs are actually sick and tired of dealing with them too, because they are approaching. So you're supposed, the role of this is to be a community manager, right? You're going and dealing with the fans and then attempting to relay the feedback that they are giving, right?
Yeah.
We've been having a really bad problem with a lot of online games where said community managers are real assholes and very condescending to the people who are testing these games in early access that aren't quality assurance employees. And so the 9-to-5 game devs started calling them out too, and basically saying, yeah, we don't like these people either because they make our job harder. Ultimately making it so that the same people who have those complaints, we never hear about those complaints because of the condescending community manager never telling us. And so we not only got the call out for a lot of these narrative consultancy firms, we also got the call out for the community managers. I personally am happy about this because one of the biggest complaints that World of Warcraft has had over the last few years, so much so that it created a mass exodus to Final Fantasy XIV, was the community managers that were being put in place by Blizzard. And those community managers were basically people that would spend terminal amounts of time on Facebook, Twitter, social media, weren't playing the games, didn't really care about the audience, and would call them everything under the sun, but never report any feedback. And so the only way that they ever got any feedback was through tickets, if they got them. So we had those people being called out as well. And a lot of those bad community managers, well, companies either had to get rid of them because they had outlived their usefulness, or they had to start hiring in office, which is really what a community manager should be, right?
Yeah, I think it'd be better to hire from within your own company to do that, so
Right.
you know how to apply company standards to
And
managing your product.
one of the best examples of this was, I don't know if you remember this game way back when. It was the game called We Happy Few. It was made by Compulsion Games. They were one of the people that got bought up when Microsoft bought up a bunch of second party indie developers, including the Hellblade developer. Compulsion was one of them too. And one of the biggest shakeups of all of this has been Compulsion Games, because a lot of those employees not only called out their shitty community managers for basically doing everything in their power to drive people away from Compulsion's upcoming games, but also basically destroying whatever credibility they had with their fans in the first place. So they actually got rid of a lot of those community managers and those 9-to-5 devs, including ones that had long since left the company because of these issues, basically calling out a lot of the other community managers that are doing the exact same thing at other companies and bringing those to those companies' attention. So basically, ultimately what's happened out of this is that, yes, everybody's screaming Gamergate 2.0, but really what's happened is a lot of gaming companies, despite all of the layoffs going on right now, are all getting smarter in the industry. Funniest thing. Not just in the community manager perspective. We have some other stuff later on too, but also restructuring to a point where the priority is making money. I know that sounds horrible and evil, but ultimately, money is what makes the world go round.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it funny that in this whole Sweet Baby Inc. situation, all of this positive actually came out of it. But I'll let you have the last word. Of the stuff that I've described here, what do you think? Like, I almost want to give the internet a pat on the back, a little bit.
A little bit, maybe, but I don't know. I haven't been paying any attention to this. I've just been like, I don't care what consulting firm does what, works on what. I'm just gonna go play my games now. Thanks.
And you know what? That's your prerogative. Like, it's your money to go out and spend. So at that point, like, if you want to be able to use things like Sweet Baby Inc. Detected, that's where I kind of sit on this. If you want to use stuff like this, that's your prerogative, right? If you want to rely on what IGN thinks about the latest indie game, well, that's your choice, because ultimately it's your money. And you should be able to spend your money however you want. For as much as I don't agree with a lot of review scores, and you and I both know that's a lot. I really just don't agree with review scores anymore. People have the right to be able to make that decision, especially when games are supposed to be like 70, 80, or even in Ubisoft's case where they want us to pay $130 plus a 12-month subscription to their service.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. So let's go ahead and get into the next story that happened out of this, which kind of is a surprise to a lot of people. In fact, some of them thought it was a April Fool's joke. But in case you haven't seen this yet, Alex, because you've been on Crunchyroll, Disney Plus, I don't know if you realize this, but Disney Plus and Hulu are owned by the same company.
I know that, yeah.
So it kind of would make sense at some point if things were bad enough that you might see a merging of the two libraries, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what happened. So Disney Plus decided out of nowhere to basically to not 100%, but merge Hulu into Disney Plus, and a little bit of the opposite. It's nowhere near as much as it is on the Disney Plus end, but now you are able to watch things like FX's Shogun on Disney Plus. Let me point this out once again. You can watch the FX equivalent of a Japanese Game of Thrones on Disney Plus now.
Okay.
And by that I mean I've watched a little bit of it. It is a gore fest. And so at that point, you not only have access to things like Shogun on there, but they've actually brought over a lot of the mainstays of Hulu into Disney Plus so that you can watch it. One of the things that makes me laugh the most is now I can watch Yu-Gi-Oh! In Disney Plus. All of it.
Really?
Yes. I double checked this. It's all there. But funniest thing, Digimon's not there. Andrea had to find this out. You cannot watch the Digimon seasons on Disney Plus. They are still only on Hulu.
Right.
So dumb. They've been basically very selective about this, but ultimately what's also happened is on Hulu you do get access to things that weren't readily available. I believe Bluey went over, so you had regular access to that on Hulu from there on in, as well as some of the other kids shows that were fairly recent. Like a lot of the Marvel stuff was brought over, and it's the recent stuff. For all those who are saying like, well, what about X-Men 97 or the old X-Men cartoons or stuff like that? Not those. We're talking about series that were like the most recent. So like, oh crap, what was it? It was the successor to Earth's Mightiest Heroes, but Avengers Assemble. That was what the series was. So that was brought over. But the thing that everybody likes to bring up now is that not only can you watch all 30 plus seasons of The Simpsons on Disney Plus, you can also watch all the seasons of Family Guy, all the seasons of King of the Hill, and, if people remember this show, all the seasons of the PJs.
I don't know that one, actually. I've never heard that one.
The PJs is Eddie Murphy's brainchild. It's basically like, you remember that live action sitcom that was based on Chris Rock's life?
Yes.
That's kind of the premise for the PJs, except it's not based on Eddie's life. It's more based on like the surroundings that he was in, because he grew up in like the Chicago projects. And so he basically created a group of people living in the projects, and he personally plays the superintendent of that, to be like that stereotypical superintendent that he always jokes about in his comedy routines.
Okay.
It's like, you think that Simpsons, like Family Guy is the worst? No, PJs, like Eddie Murphy got a lot of slack when it came to that series. And it's actually one of the reasons I love it so much, is because it's very stereotypical, enough to a point where I'm kind of surprised that Disney hasn't taken it off because of all of the black stereotypes that have come out in it. But yeah, you have access to all of this stuff. And ultimately, this has actually proven to be a bit of a good financial move for Disney. Not a huge one, but they have been able to save some money in this process. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
I'm kind of really wondering why Hulu is still a thing when now that Disney Plus is a thing. Like, why do they need two separate streaming apps? I really don't quite get it now.
This is not going to make sense to you at all, but I will explain it as best as I can. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Live TV.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's primarily why, because Hulu has this weird infrastructure where they basically will put up they don't have contracts for everything anymore, but they used to have a lot of them. And they would basically put up the 7 most recent episodes of a given show. And then once they had a brand new one, the oldest one would cycle out. And you wouldn't see that again unless it got some kind of contract with Hulu. And they've been able to keep that contract going, not just for live TV, but for sports. And that's where a lot of their ESPN stuff has been for the last few years. And that's why Hulu is still a thing. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's ultimately why. That, and also one of the big contracts that they have is all of the Tonight shows, basically. So they're able to showcase like I don't like all the late shows, roughly.
Right. Yeah,
So
for live TV, I get it. I think it makes sense for sports and live TV. For
but
sure.
ultimately, I actually wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 to 10 years that Hulu basically gets phased out, because live TV is not. I mean, it is an active something now, but it is kind of getting phased out. People are more preferential towards streaming stuff, and now YouTube and other services are basically providing live TV services that are not blowing Hulu out of the water, but they are making it a competitive space. So that's ultimately why. But yeah, eventually I would not be surprised if Disney Plus eventually just merges with Hulu, which might be a sad thing because a lot of those contracts I don't think will get renewed. So like Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't think will get renewed. You'll have to rely on other things to get that. A lot of the older animes and older animation projects on there probably are not going to stay on Disney Plus. I guarantee you the PJs are not going to stay there for very long. I've even heard, like, because you can get Bob's Burgers on it, and I've heard Bob's Burgers is pretty crass too. I would not be surprised if that gets taken off eventually. But yeah, that's ultimately what happened. Any final thoughts on this one? Like, does this immediately make you want to go experiment with what they have?
Probably, because Disney Plus does have a lot of good things. I did actually just drop my Max account because I just felt I wasn't getting much out of it for my money.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I might just shift more of my focus over to Disney Plus because they still have a lot of good stuff there.
What's funny is a lot of the services that we've had, we've actually been merging into other services. So for example, we have Walmart Plus, and with Walmart Plus, we're allowed to put our Paramount Plus account into that. So now we have Paramount Plus because we have Walmart Plus. And Max
nice.
just merged with what is the benefit we get out of it? I think it's my cell phone. So we can technically have our Max membership open and we don't have to pay for it monthly because it's already part of another. But it's funny how a lot of streaming platforms are now considering those options and trying to basically survive, because the whole model of we'll only get it when you have something new isn't really working for a lot of those platforms, especially for Max. So with that, let's go ahead and move into the next story here. And this one was out of nowhere, honestly, but it might be something that we have to do a little bit more detail on later on. I guess my first question is, had you heard about this documentary that was coming out called Quiet on Set?
Yeah, I heard about it.
So do you want to give a quick overview since you had already heard about it, or do you want me to do?
I could do it real fast. You know, it's basically just kind of a tell-all about a lot of child stars' experiences working on Nickelodeon shows, some of the abuses they've suffered over the years.
And this one is specifically towards
sexual.
Nickelodeon. It doesn't really go into like Disney or any of that stuff. It's like, and it's specifically based around, I believe, the early 2000s shows, isn't it?
I might even go as far back as the 90s.
Does it go to the 90s? Okay.
I haven't seen it myself, but I think it might go that far back unless he just did something as an aside, but I believe Kenan Thompson is featured in it, or he may not be, or he just tweeted about it. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen it.
I'm not sure if he got interviewed, but there's like pictures and documentation of him being involved at some point. So it might just be a minor involvement, because I know that Kenan in particular has been kind of trying to separate from a lot of the stuff he did as a kid and trying to keep his adult career its own thing, which might ultimately be a good thing, because what he's got going right now is working for him. But more importantly, what's interesting is a lot of the exposure and targeting of this particular documentary is based around Dan Schneider, who Dan is like basically the lead producer for a lot of the stuff that gets covered here. So For example, he was part of all that. I want to say from the second season on. That's when he started showing up in the cast. He also worked on things like iCarly, Victorious, The Amanda Show, stuff like that. And
Kenan and Kel too. He was a writer on that show.
He worked on a lot of those shows. And this does not paint a flattering light for him, ultimately.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been like long YouTube exposés about Dan Schneider's creepy behavior before, so none of it really of this is surprising to me.
What's funny is that there's a lot more exposés on him, but like when people go onto the Disney side of things, it's very difficult to find somebody who has as much exposure as Dan did. Because in a lot of cases, like when it comes to the early 2000s Disney shows, they cycle through producers and talent so fast that it's very difficult to be able to say, okay, well, these are all like this 20-year block is just this guy. Whereas with Nickelodeon, it absolutely was this guy. It was Dan Schneider. And some of the stories that were being told out of this, like I haven't seen the documentary. I've only seen snippets of it, but some of it is downright creepy. Enough so that the stars of iCarly were basically crediting a lot of the adult staff members or a lot of the adult talent for being on set as often as they were, because they kind of noticed a lot of the weird behavior that, for example, Dan Schneider would exhibit on set. And they've even been interviewed in this documentary basically saying, like, we didn't feel, we have kids ourselves. We didn't feel like it was a good idea to leave him alone with these kids on set. And it even got worse because after the documentary hit, we also got a little bit more of an expose from Drake Bell from Drake and Josh, who had a lot of very unsettling stories to tell. Long story short, basically Dan Schneider tried to get him away from his parents. And in some cases basically just kind of disowned them. And then ultimately when he was offered to stay on Dan Schneider's couch, well, there was an incident that occurred at about 3 a.m. I'm not saying any more than that, but Drake openly admits that he does not have good relations with Dan Schneider or any of the production staff that worked at Nickelodeon at the time. So that being said, wow, I know that a lot of people suspected it, but when you get it officially on, like right there, black and white on paper, it's very disheartening, especially considering like how many kids were just so invested in those eras of Nickelodeon.
Yeah. Sure.
You brought up the 90s. Now that makes me want to ask the question, like, does Melissa Joan Hart have stories about Dan Schneider from working on Clarissa? It makes me want to ask a lot of like the original All That cast and see if, because some of those people, they don't even work in Hollywood anymore. And a lot of it is when they've been interviewed, they basically have said like they hated the creepy culture that is in Hollywood and they wanted nothing to do with it. And some of them have even said, Dan Schneider was one of those reasons.
Yeah. Like I said, there's been plenty of stuff on YouTube before this documentary about how much of a creep Schneider is and all his weird behavior. So none of this is surprising to me in the least.
Well, and what's even more interesting is after the documentary aired, immediately Dan Schneider was approached for comment. And basically he came out and just said, and basically started up his apology tour, roughly. Which I think was probably the best thing that he could have done out of that because of the shit firestorm that was coming his way. I mean, obviously it's not like there's any crimes that can be charged for now because statute of limitations have run out. But the way that Dan Schneider was ultimately let go from Nickelodeon, or at least the people have inferred is why he was let go, is probably because of this stuff. And so Nickelodeon probably just decided to handle it that way because of all the potential lawsuits they probably had coming their way.
I can
So,
believe it. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a good story, but unfortunately, it's one of those things that a lot of people have suspected for the longest time. I've already heard. I don't know if there's ever been any confirmation, but a lot of people have speculated that the reason Amanda Bynes is the way she is now is probably because she had some fucked up relations with people like Dan Schneider. And after hearing some of the stuff that's being said about Quiet on the Set, I almost wonder if it's true.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but also just being a child star is plenty hard enough.
Yes, no, there's a reason that like because immediately as soon as this happened, like everybody wanted to know, well, what about the Disney kids? And in some cases, that's already been kind of proven that they didn't really have those problems on set with Mickey Mouse Club or things like that. Instead, it's just the kids kind of went downhill all on their own. Ultimately, like the biggest example I can think of is Britney Spears. Like, look at all the shit that she's going through now.
Yeah.
I mean, have you followed any of that? Like, she's constantly fighting with her dad, who's like the executor of her estate, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been hearing quite a bit about Britney too.
It's ridiculous, but it's one of those things where people did speculate, like, did Disney ultimately F her up? And no, it ultimately looks like it was probably Britney that effed herself up.
I think it's
or a
more
mixture of both.
I don't know. I would probably put more emphasis on just her time as a pop star, and some of the other mental challenges she's faced in her life.
Yeah, that's the next big documentary that really needs to happen, because I would love to hear some. There has to be some horror stories of like being a '90s pop star like Britney or Christina, or even the boy bands probably have some horror stories too.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yeah. So you haven't seen this. Are you intending on seeing it at some point?
I might look into it, but I don't think I'm gonna go out of my way to watch it, just because, again, I've kind of known a lot of these stories before from other videos and YouTube videos in the past, or just like interviews from some of the cast. I know Jeanette McCurdy, who was on iCarly. She's long since left Hollywood now. She's been pretty outspoken about what a miserable time it was for her as a kid growing up.
She's not the only one that I've heard. There was another one of like the original All That cast. It was one of the female cast members, but not like a lot of people think it's what was it, Lori Beth? It's one of the other ones that basically just kind of left Hollywood and has never looked back. And it's basically been kind of the same stories that I've heard from, I don't know if you've seen this, but one of the leads from Stranger Things also recently just kind of left the sphere of Hollywood altogether, and a lot of it was because of the stories that she had to tell for a lot of the things that were happening on the set of Stranger Things. So it's definitely one of those things where I would totally believe that the culture is probably part of it. But here's the thing. I wasn't originally planning on seeing this because it covers an era of Nickelodeon that I didn't really watch. I watched all that, but like stuff like iCarly, I wasn't watching that. But now that you've said that it covers some of the 90s stuff, I am at least a little intrigued. Because
maybe don't, like I said, I haven't seen it, so don't take my word if it does cover anything in the 90s.
Double check that. But if it did cover the 90s era, I would be interested, because there are a few celebrities from that era that I would like to see if maybe they had some stories to tell. And I won't say names right off the bat because I speculate, but I know absolutely nothing. I've looked up none of this stuff. But yeah, so final thoughts on this one. I mean, it's not surprising that stuff like this is coming out. Like, documentaries like this are happening a lot more often, but the fact that, these indictments are happening on kids' TV, we've heard of them over the decades. I'm not surprised that we're hearing even more accusations.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things that I found funny out of this, I remember saying this on a stream with you, but because of the quiet on the set stuff, people were actually reaching out to Jake Lloyd to see if one of the reasons that he's been as messed up as he has been was because of shit that was happening on the Star Wars set.
Oh
And
yeah,
this
that's
is what I
been
was talking
long,
about,
man.
where his mom reached out and basically said, no, that's not the case. You know, he had a bunch of other stuff happening in the background, and ultimately
Uh-huh.
he just hasn't cared.
Yeah, that has been like a popular narrative for a very long time that Jake Lloyd was like bullied mercilessly for Star Wars, and yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really glad that the air's been cleared up on that. Just
No, in
saying,
fact,
yeah,
I can't remember. I think they said they took him out of school because, and not because of the Darth Vader stuff. They took him out because, like, around that same time was when his parents' divorce happened, and so he
yeah,
was
and
already in a very volatile state.
yeah, he's
So
definitely had a lot of things go down in his life.
yeah, but basically the mom came out and said, yeah, none of that has affected anything. It's not related to any of his recent arrests or anything like that. He's just had his own stuff that he's had to work through.
Mhm.
Which I thought that was actually a good idea for the mom to come out and say that instead of Jake, and just put that out there, even though she didn't have to.
Yeah,
Ultimately, I might look into this if I find enough homework basically saying that it covers the 90s era, but the era that it's specifically talking about, I didn't watch a lot of the stuff that was coming out at Nickelodeon around that time. I was basically watching the cartoons, and that was about it. So, not really my cup of tea. But let's go ahead and move on into the next story, which once again kind of bounces into the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff, but not not directly addressing them, but basically more as a result of all the stuff that was happening. Basically, Microsoft decided to put out a new set of guidelines in regards to game development when it comes to creating your story and, more importantly, creating your characters. So the long story short of this is that they put out a new guidelines for the framework of your game development that had to include the following things. And you tell me whether or not you think that these will work in the long run, Alex. But the first guideline they had was approachability. It is which ensures all players, existing and new, experienced and novice, feel safe and welcome. Now,
okay.
that's great and all, but can you 100% guarantee that? Because not even Call of Duty can guarantee that.
I mean, that's kind of a very vague guideline. It's sort of like,
I'm glad you pointed that out, because you're going to see a pattern here.
right.
Representation is about reflecting the diversity of the player and creator community, so everyone can feel that they belong. I hate to be the broken record here. That's just DEI nonsense. Basically saying we have to check all the boxes and make sure that we have at least one character for each demographic. Whether or not that character is a good representation for that demographic, you have to have it. So yeah, but it's vague enough to a point where it can mean anything. The third guideline is globalization. And it's about making global players feel at home, even when we have countries that still don't have access to Xbox services. And ensuring that their experience has local relevance and respect.
So I guess that means they're going to try and make more games that would tailor to specific countries' tastes. Okay.
Okay, but how can you 100% guarantee that without spending a butt ton of money?
I mean, you can, but I can something like that. I could see more like Microsoft maybe making more divestments into international studios. Well, I mean, of course, there's also the worst end. Basically doing what Disney would do with some of its Marvel movies to, appease the Chinese censors and
Maybe.
make it more palatable. But it's just sort of like it could kind of go one of those two ways. I see either they make more broad divestments for different international studios, or more approachments to to publish from smaller studios outside the US, but yeah, it's pretty broad there.
Yeah, the only problem that I have with this is once again, it's very broad. And here's the thing. Yes, they could be catering to a Chinese demographic, but what happens when you have another country completely on the other side of the globe that is 100% opposed to the Chinese, what the Chinese demographic wants? It's very difficult to be able to hit all of those rungs and be able to make it stick. And so, unfortunately, what a lot of this, I think, means is they would go towards the market that has the most money to offer, so to speak. So can you really call it globalization when it's really just accommodating to one particular point of the globe? And it's not really. So it's not really globalized. And then finally, accessibility, about making games and experiences playable for people with disabilities, which, frankly, I don't think needs to be mentioned because they already are doing that. Because Microsoft...
most games already do that.
Yeah. Microsoft was the first... Yeah, they were the first people that came out with disability-based controllers. They were the first ones that came out with framework in games that allowed for things like color blindness and subtitles for the hearing impaired and stuff like that. They were the first ones. So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't think you need to mention this one because this already has been a staple of your framework. But okay, you mentioned it. Cool. But what ultimately also a lot of people have gained out of it is that in order to promote the values, they also put guides for developers to follow in order to keep their titles sufficiently progressive and unoffensive. And that's where things get very difficult because, well, everybody, if we've learned anything over the last 5 to 10 years, Alex, is that everybody can be offended by anything.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's kind of difficult to be able to cater to all of the guidelines that you want to set here. But these in particular are the things that Microsoft is trying to aim for. Are you telling new stories or sharing new perspectives within the product experience? Well, God, I'd hope so.
Yeah.
Because, story is really a big driving force in the gaming industry. I know that people want to point out, well, there's Call of Duty and there's Fortnite, but yeah, there's still also games like Fallout. So yeah, you kind of need new stories are something that needs to happen, not creatively bankrupt stories that we're seeing all over the place. Do all of your characters / player depictions look the same? Well, why would they need to look the same? Like, we're all different. Ultimately, what this one means, Alex, is, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's been a huge influx in the gaming industry to start having every game basically have character creation suites.
I have not seen that, no.
Which, what are your thoughts on a character creation suite?
I mean, I love them when they're around, but yeah, I don't think that's going to suit every single game.
Right.
I think that's a bit impractical. People, and I don't think anybody, at least nobody on the gaming industry side, is seriously proposing that. I could just see like ignorant people who don't understand how games work pushing for something like that, but that's really impractical to ask that for every game.
Yeah, and here's here's the thing though. The gaming industry is kind of moving in that direction where they are trying to have more complex character creation suites within their games. So like, for example, having something as complex as, say, like a Bethesda game, where in some cases, Alex, I have no problem telling you some games don't need that. Like, some games can just have predetermined characters, and I'm 100% okay with that, as long as that fits within the context and the narrative of the game. Like, if I'm supposed to play Lara Croft as a Tomb Raider, I'm okay with not having to create my own version of Lara Croft. And so at that point, like, that's kind of my viewpoint in the whole matter. Is like, do you need to have the character creation suite, or are you just putting it in there because everybody else is doing it? Much like how everybody has big maps, but then they never fill them. Or everybody has talent trees, but they're very generic. That's kind of the issue there. The next one is, what steps have you taken to ensure characters are represented respectfully and authentically? How do you determine any of that? Because some characters, namely your villains, have to be disrespected and are supposed to be lying snakes and thus not authentic.
That's gonna just depend a lot on the kind of game and the kind of story you're telling, really.
Right. So the next one is, how have you validated assumptions you have made about your audience to check for blind spots or unintended stereotypes? Basically saying you shouldn't have stereotypes in your game, even though maybe your story has need for it. Or maybe your game creates stereotypes within the context of that universe.
Mm-hmm.
Like Cyberpunk. Funniest thing how a lot of this stuff can happen. Would you feel proud to show a member of a community how their culture/character is depicted within your experience? I'm going to answer this right here now. No, because everybody's offended by everything. And so at that point, if I was ever entailed to try and do this, I would basically say, go play the game yourself. Here's where the demo is. And you can check it out on Steam, or you can check it out on PSN. I'm not even usually the guy anymore that goes, well, you need to be playing this game because this. I instead just go, okay, well, here's the demo link and go play it. I'm not usually like showing people. Oh, but it gets even better, Alex. How are the wide range of customers depicted within your product's content portfolio and communications? Basically saying, you better not have any characters with blackface, even though you might not even you've never had them to begin with.
I guess then you don't have to worry.
Why do we even need to address it?
I don't know. I don't really get what that means. It's a lot of weird gobbledygook.
A lot of these questions are incredibly vague, right? And so in a lot of cases, they can mean a lot of things. And so what Microsoft is basically saying is, if you don't fit our vague but narrow interpretation, we might not let your game on Game Pass. But you want to make money just as much as any independent game developer. So why not just put it on there? And let people decide for themselves.
I get it. Some of these are pretty vague or very broad, but it's sort of like, I guess it's just comes down to how is Microsoft going to interpret them. And right now, I guess nobody knows what the big boss is at Microsoft.
Right. Well, I don't even think Microsoft knows what they want to do. And that's primarily because of some of the decisions that they've made over the last couple of months. Basically, for those who don't know, Uncle Phil's investments haven't been working out very well. Let's put it that way, because they'll probably end up in an agenda. But yeah, Uncle Phil's investments haven't been working out very well, and he's probably paying for it in the background. So the next one that we have, what process have you used to validate how different games of people or cultures are represented in your experience? Well, again, that's vague as crap. What percent of screen time or on-screen presence is held by different gender or racial identities? Does it matter? I really want to ask this question of a lot of AAA developers. Does it matter? Because it's the creator's decision on whether or not that character, not their racial or gender identity, that character should be getting this amount of screen time. Because it shouldn't ever be about identity. It should just be about having good characters. Do you have a process to review key decisions with the lens of helping customers feel seen? Well, all companies have that to an extent. And unfortunately, a lot of it has been through relying on asshole community managers, but now that's getting very, very much fixed. But let's cut to the chase for the ones that probably matter a little bit more to you, Alex, shall we? Are you creating playable female characters that are equal in skill and ability to their male peers? Are your female characters... What was that?
Never mind. Go ahead.
Are your female characters equipped with clothing and armor that fit their tasks. Do they have exaggerated body proportions? The fuck does it matter, Microsoft? This is basically Microsoft's response to Stellar Blade, ultimately. Is you no longer can have female characters that have, quote, exaggerated body proportions. What that basically means is you can't have women looking like women anymore. And by that, I mean having feminine features. So you can't have the hourglass figure. You can't have exaggerated boob size or anything like that because you might offend somebody. But it's the game developer making the character, right?
Right.
Like we've said numerous times over the years, boobs, not blood, right? We care more about whether or not a female character is an actual character versus whether or not they are basically just eye candy. And in a lot of cases, a lot of game companies make female characters. And in particular, the one I love that people brought up is that basically characters like Tifa Lockhart wouldn't exist on an Xbox platform. Well, they will now because of Square Enix's new approach, but they basically are saying that you couldn't create a Tifa Lockhart on Xbox platforms anymore. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's Microsoft, I guess, but I don't know. I really don't have much to add to this.
Yeah.
Like, I already don't really play much on Xbox platforms anymore. I mean, ever, I should say, not anymore, but ever. I don't really play Xbox, so I don't really think any of this applies much to me.
It does, but that's just because, as you're going to find out in the next month's agenda, Sony's putting out a very similar guideline.
Oh yeah, but somebody's been on the censor train.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They've been on the censor train for how many years now?
Quite a few. It's
yeah. Well, I mean, Sony even like as we've since found out after FF7 Rebirth's release, they were actively putting out memos trying to change Tifa's character design. So yeah, there you go. And even they try to interfere with Stellar Blade. So, but the other thing that I also want to bring up is when the story allows, do you show male characters who display a full range of emotions, including joy, sadness, and vulnerability? Now,
like, I could get behind that personally because I get tired of the boring stoic male character all the time.
But here's the thing. If the character is supposed to be stoic, is it right to change them because the guidelines say we have to?
No.
This is exactly. This is the exact same thing of like, and I would say this if it was a female character too. You know, like Samus Aran is always going to be depicted as stoic. Like there's no way anybody's going to change that. I know that some people are going to, well, Other M's a bad example. But even in Metroid Dread, Samus was depicted as stoic and not unfeeling, but very down to business. So at that point, I don't have a problem if that's what the character is designed to be. But if you have to change it because you now have to showcase vulnerability, I don't want to change a character just because Microsoft is breathing down your throat. That's the same thing as having the marketing department of your company breathing down your throat. I'm totally, probably to a fault even, more supportive of the creator's vision than anything else. I mean, for example, you're making a game right now. I would like, even if you had like some kind of corporate backing that was happening there, I would literally be against them coming and breathing down your neck and saying, oh, well, this character has to be like this. Because it's ultimately your vision. It's ultimately what you want to create, not them. If obviously, if they wanted to do this, they could go and do it themselves. They have the money. So that's ultimately kind of my problem with it. And I just really wish that game companies, and to some extent, like even with AAA, with a lot of the financial backers now and narrative consultancy and all that, let the creator of the game do what they're gonna do and let the market decide whether or not it was a good decision. Because the market will decide ultimately. If people want the chick with big boobs, they're going to pick the chick with big boobs, whether you like it or not. And so at that point, you might as well just go for good characters instead of whether or not they fulfill specific demographics or anything like that. That's just, to me, that's basically playing the equivalent of the SATs with story design. And I hated those bubble sheets, and I would never want anybody to endure those bubble sheets ever in their lives, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, yeah, and you don't really have anything else to add here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and get into the discussion that we have here, because this discussion we've actually talked about quite a bit, and surprisingly, games journalism pointed out a lot of the issues that we've been seeing in the gaming industry. So really quick, when I found this article, I immediately tried to post it to everybody. Did you end up reading this article at all?
Yes, I believe I did. I did read this. Yes.
I actually think, like, I have numerous problems with a lot of people over at Polygon, but I will say that in this particular article's case, they made a very compelling argument for a lot of the things that we've been complaining about in the games industry. So I'm not going to go over everything, but basically the premise of the argument of the article was going into how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is basically a culmination of all of the major problems that are existing in the current day gaming industry, which is why we're seeing numerous companies laying off a bunch of staff and basically restructuring a lot of their design philosophies in order to accommodate for how the industry is currently working. And I'm just basically going to break this down into the three major things that they had complaints about with this, because the article is actually pretty extensive. But one of the biggest things they had was the immense amount of bloat that has basically been incurred over the last few years, specifically the radical amount of bloat that occurred during the pandemic. So basically what I mean by bloat is hiring extra hundreds of staff members in order to help get a game out the door, and ultimately not being able to keep them, even though, you may have signed a contract to work here for like 3 years or whatnot. And I would actually argue that this was probably happening before 2020, but it just wasn't on steroids like it was in 2020. It was just happening gradually, but then 2020 happened, and they really just had to get these games out the door because there was that massive influx where people were bored and they wanted to play games because they had nothing else to do during the day. And was there anything you wanted to add with the bloat? Like we've talked about it a number of times. I could probably point out to a couple of podcasts where we brought that up.
I don't know. I mean, it makes sense to bring in a lot of staff to polish up a game and finish it off, especially when we're talking like these big AAA games. But I would almost think then the problem is, of course, the games are so expensive to produce, and I don't know at what point they bring these people in. And I actually almost would think the opposite idea of cutting back on that would be the worst. I'd almost think it'd be better if maybe these companies did outsource a little bit more and split the labor pool a lot more, especially now that very recently here in the US, legally speaking, non-compete, the whole bullshit with non-compete agreements is finally getting rid of across a lot of the industries.
It's what was it? It's basically being nerfed to an extent.
Yeah.
Like a lot of non-compete clauses, I think, were like 5 to 10 years. Now they're being reduced to like, I think the worst I've heard is 3. But most of them are like non-compete for 6 months to a year. And that is, I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. That is absolutely a good thing, because the non-competes, that was hurting a lot of people, especially if they were getting laid off, because the non-compete would still exist in that contract. So at that point, like they were basically screwed 3 different ways by the people that they were trying to help. So I'm glad that they're actually getting rid of that. Not getting rid of it, but they're definitely minimizing it to an extent.
Right.
But the other thing that I'm also happy about is that they are starting to look at a lot of those developer contracts and some of the weird ass clauses in them. They're looking into a lot of those weird clauses, like, for example, any IP that you create and you mention to any executive is officially the company's IP. And they're starting to look at those and actually starting to iron a lot of those out. Because those were stupid, were they not?
Yeah, for sure.
Because, you know, you basically you destroy any creativity that's happening in the process at all, because nobody wants to bring their idea, because what if it doesn't work out? Well, they can't do anything with it. So, but I can see where you have some concerns there. You think that a bigger staff would help to be able to get a lot of those games out.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes into the next problem that we have, which is that games are becoming, so this is the second big point, games are getting a lot more expensive to make. And specifically, what they're talking about is trying to accommodate to what is considered the industry standard when it comes to making a AAA game. And correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but the industry standard is kind of bullshit, because the industry standard is basically that every game has to be fucking Grand Theft Auto. It has to have a tremendous map, like dwarfing the size of anything that has come before. It also has to have full vibrant worlds that have tons of AI basically dictating what NPCs are doing throughout the day. You have to be able to have immense character creator suites. You have to have amazing talents that anybody can work with. You know, all the generic stuff that we've had complaints with. That is the industry standard. But what if your game doesn't have to have them and you can save some money out of that? That's kind of my issue with it, is like, do games ultimately have to be, because one of the examples that gets brought up in this article is we found out that Horizon Forbidden West in particular, no, actually, sorry, not Horizon, Spider-Man 2 cost $315 million to develop. Now, did it need to cost $315 million? I'm sure we could go through everything in there, Alex, and figure out things that could have been dropped, that could have reduced the overall size of it. But for the sake of argument, it is a superhero game. It is supposed to have a full-on kind of Grand Theft Auto type map where you can do a bunch of different tasks, whether it be unlocking costumes, whether it be stopping bank heists, you know, like, it already has to be a very big, ambitious project. So I'm not faulting it for that, because, you know, that's kind of the way things are going. But $315 million, that's a lot of chump change to deal out. That's a lot,
yeah.
And so at that point, my question would be, and I brought this up to you numerous times, does every game need to be $315 million? And that's the issue, is that not every game needs to be like that. You can easily make smaller games that maybe don't take a whole lot of time and are like 60 million. And the reason that that's a good thing is because it allows more room for profit. And that's ultimately what these game companies want to see. They want to be able to see return on their investment. But when you have huge $300 million budgets, that doesn't really allow for a lot of profit window.
Yeah. I don't know what the margin for games is, but like with movies, you know, it's said that a movie needs to like make twice as much money,
right,
to make it to break even, just to break even.
Yeah,
you would have to make twice its budget back just to break even.
Basically,
so I can imagine,
because not only are you having to pay for like the marketing budget and things like that, but a lot of people don't realize this. Like, there are fees that the film companies have to pay in order to keep their films in theaters. And how do they pay that? They pay it through ticket sales.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is like, okay, well, it's great and all that a game or that a movie is making, 60 million or whatever. But if its budget is, like, let's just say the budget was 30 million, then it basically broke even with its earnings. And that's not profit in terms of the film company. That's not extra money that they can utilize towards another project. So that's kind of one of the big issues that the gaming industry is currently finding themselves in. And what makes it even worse is the third major complaint that is issued in this, and actually been one of the biggest complaints that a lot of game developing companies, for example, like Larian. Do you remember who Larian is?
No.
Larian is the company that made Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
And they actually have been one of the biggest vocal opponents to a lot of what's going on in the modern day gaming industry right now, because they see a lot of the problems and the writing on the wall, and actually have come out against things like Sweet Baby Inc. and basically said, yeah, but it's not going to matter if those companies don't exist and have to keep laying people off. And they've been pointing out constantly what they did in order to keep everything breaking even to make Baldur's Gate 3. And I actually have appreciated it, because this is basically the VP of Larian coming out and saying a lot of this stuff, and it lets you know like what has been said, like what all of the details that they've had to do in order to keep Baldur's Gate 3 in the black, but also why Baldur's Gate 4 is not happening from Larian, because they see the writing on the wall and they don't want to deal with it. But the third complaint is that everybody wants to adopt, or every AAA studio rather, wants to adopt what is called the Rockstar model. And that Rockstar model is basically take 5 to 7 years to develop a video game, work on nothing else in the meantime, and basically ride the success of your previous game for as long as you possibly can before you get your next game out. Do I need to mention the problems that can come from that? Because,
I don't think so.
Like, Rockstar as a studio, I'm not faulting them. They can do this. But a lot of people fail to realize that they aren't just working on Grand Theft Auto. Because before Grand Theft Auto, there was Red Dead. And they basically have that cycle to constantly rely on. Is they have like 2 or 3 games that are being worked on for those 5 to 7 year periods that they can then ride the coattails of until the next one. But a lot of people tend to forget this. And it's a very big deal. You spend 5 to 7 years making nothing else. So for 5 to 7 years, you are a business that has no other products coming out.
Yeah.
Do I even need to mention the problems that come from that, Alex?
Yeah, it's just five or more years. 5 years, pretty much at the very least. So, like, how long's the new Grand Theft Auto been in development for? Like, way longer, right?
It's coming up on its 7th year, I believe. Somebody actually did the math. It's actually going to be over 7 years when it actually comes out. It's due later this year. It's either later this year or later next year.
Yeah, so we're talking like 5 years on a good production and a good cycle, right? Imagine a game like that. Where that's being expected as the minimum now, but even analysts are now saying that starting next year, that will go from 5 to 7 to 6 to 9 years. Yeah. So, I mean, unless there's some incredible major breakthrough in AI technology that can shorten the time in the next several years here, it's still good. We're still looking at a very long turnover cycle, and so I guess a very major studio like, say, Naughty Dog or Rockstar that has the big funding, the big studios behind them can do that. But if you're a mid-sized studio or a small studio, there's just no way.
No way. Well, and in some cases, it doesn't really work for Naughty Dog because as much as Neil Druckmann wants to come out and say, like, well, we have this game and we have that game, eventually he has to answer to his Sony overlords because they have to check in. It's their money on the line, and they have to say, okay, where are you at? Are you going to be able to fit this deadline? And if you aren't, that's extra money that we have to put into this game's development. So it doesn't help him in the long run. And actually what's sad about this year is that more bigger companies are starting to feel that heat. Specifically, Square Enix is really feeling that heat because, well, if you haven't noticed, Square Enix is not in good shape right now. And part of that is because of the insane amount of money they put into the Avengers game that never brought anything remotely back to bring them into the black. They were very much in the red from that. And because of that, they've had to sell studios off. They've had to cancel projects. But just think, if they adopted the Rockstar model and all you would expect from them from here on in was the next FF7 remake or the next Final Fantasy game, but you got nothing else from them ever, and you'd have to wait about the same time it took for them to get Kingdom Hearts 3 out the door. It's not feasible as a business. And frankly, given how much in the red Square Enix is, it basically guarantees bankruptcy. Roughly. Yeah. And so at that point, and that's one of the things that's very scary about this article is that a lot of AAA studios, even some AA studios, are thinking that this is what the industry standard has to be now. Except the problem is that they forget the industry has always been a fickle thing, and it has changed numerous times over the past 5 years. And if what works for the industry doesn't work for your company, you probably shouldn't be following what the industry is doing. You should probably be going to the beat of your own drum. Which is one of the things that has actually made me very happy. We'll be able to go more into detail next month because a lot of those companies came out with their plans. But many companies basically came out, Alex, and said, yeah, we're going to have to drop our AAA development. We're going to have to basically step ourselves down to a AA studio in order to survive. And instead focus on the quality of our games so that what we put out is going to be able to bring that money back in. Which, as far as I'm concerned, is exactly what people should be doing. Right?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, I don't like all the layoffs that are happening. I don't want to see people laid off. I instead want to see these companies thrive and flourish and be able to show games for what they can be. But they can't do that if they're trying to follow a model that works for one studio. But even then doesn't really work as well for that studio in some years. That's the thing. Is like, a lot of people don't realize this, is Rockstar's able to do that. But Rockstar isn't solely owned. Take-Two owns them. And Take-Two owns a bunch of other companies. So they're still able to keep themselves afloat because while Rockstar does that 5 to 7 year model, they have other studios that are making games. They have a consistent flow of products going out into the marketplace. You know, for as much as people want to bring up, well, you're such a Blizzard fan. Blizzard's not solely owned. First, they were owned by I could go into all of the companies that have owned Blizzard, but let's just go the last two. They were owned by Activision, so they were allowed to do that model while Activision was continuing to pump out Call of Duty games, and now they're owned by Microsoft.
Right.
That's the problem there. So, ultimately, Alex, I'm going to let you have the final thought here. Is there anything you want to add to this that maybe this article didn't cover that is a concern, or things that maybe you think should be considered that weren't brought up in the article?
I would just say a big thing is maybe shorten some of the length of games. I'm like, you got games that go like on for like 60, 70 plus hours here.
Right.
Right. And I'm just like,
have to be that much. Right.
Yeah. I don't think they all need to be so long. Maybe,
I haven't played Spider-Man 2, so you're the person who could ultimately answer this for me. But some of the complaints that I've seen is like there's upwards of 90 to 100 hours of content in Spider-Man 2, but if you're just looking to do the story or whatever, you're probably looking at not even half that, probably 30 or 40 hours into that story just to get it. So I'm not faulting Insomniac for putting 100 plus hours in there, but did it all need to be there in the base game? Or maybe you could have added 10 hours through DLC?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It's definitely something that has to be considered. And what I'm actually more worried about is that because of how these things are building themselves, Alex, what's one of the things that we really hate right now in the gaming industry? Microtransactions.
Yeah.
In order to make this $315 million budget, you have to have that. There's no other way.
Yeah.
So how can we get rid of that if that now becomes a necessity in order for a game to survive? That's where a lot of this crap comes in. But I interrupted you. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, pretty much just saying maybe just shorten the length of your games, even if they are big AAA titles. You probably don't need to make it 40 to 50 or more hours. You can probably make a solid 20 or 30-hour game, and then it won't take you so long. So,
I mean, some of the best games that we've played over the last few years have been, 20, 30 hours?
Yeah.
Like Uncharted 4 is probably the biggest that... Actually, let me go with... because you haven't seen 4, but Uncharted 3 was like 15 hours? And probably got tons of enjoyment out of that game.
Yeah. Sometimes you can just be kind of short and sweet and to the point. You don't need to go out. I love playing Spider-Man, and I love, swinging around New York and busting bad guys, and I love all the side stuff you can do, but the story is just as fulfilling by itself. So I would have been just as happy if, like I said, I love the side content that they put into the Spider-Man games, but if it wasn't there and you had this, but you still had the same main story, I would have been just as satisfied with that.
I'm just curious. So, like the original Spider-Man that came out in 2018, 17 hours. Spider-Man 2 is exactly the same. So the main story can be completed in about 20 hours.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So at that point, like, you're putting in stuff that is, if we're saying that there's enough content in there for upwards of 60 to 80 to 90 hours of, that's a lot of bonus stuff that maybe doesn't have to be there right away. And you could add in as DLC. Because one thing I know that got said about 2018 Spider-Man, people loved the DLC because of the shit that they added.
Yeah.
Why not go polish that stuff?
It kind of drives me crazy, but I'll put in another good example. City Skylines, the original, which was kind of an indie send-up to SimCity, after EA really dropped the ball on their
when they
reboot of SimCity. Yeah.
Oh,
so I think they kept that original alive. I have not played the sequel because I don't think my computer's powerful enough for it, but
they've kept it alive, but barely.
Yeah, they've kept it alive because of DLC, right? The base game was pretty bare bones because it was an indie game, but for a big build it sandbox kind of game, they really kept it going because of DLC. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
So maybe if you want to add a lot of extra content, there's DLC for that.
Right, exactly. I mean, for example, like I'm looking at City Skylines right now. So the solo content for it is about 50 hours, and I'm guaranteeing you that a lot of that additional stuff is brought in through DLC, which means that if you just want the base experience, it's probably not that expensive to be able to get it, and then you can make the decision, oh, well, I want to try this DLC and see whether or not I'll like it. And so then at that point, I can already make the argument, does the game need to be $70? Well, if you play it right, maybe it doesn't. And you could easily just bring stuff in through DLC that would make it up to, $90 to $100 in value. But at that point, it would be worth that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Another big example that I'm thinking of, because you brought it up, I don't know why I like this game, Alex, and don't at me about this, but Power Wash Simulator. When that base game came out, it was very cheap. I think it was like a $25 game when it came out for Steam. But do you know how many packages of DLC that game has now? All of which, by the way, are just small, like, additional levels that are like $2 or $5 roughly. So let me just go over some of these for you. So do you know what Power Wash Simulator is?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So you get the premise of it. So this basically adds additional levels that you can go and clean a different surrounding. So this game has a Tomb Raider content pack, which is basically you go and power wash Lara Croft's mansion.
Right.
So that's a $5 DLC right there. SpongeBob SquarePants. You can go down SpongeBob's neighborhood and power wash it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's another $5, right?
Yeah.
Midgar in Final Fantasy VII Remake, the remake version. That's another $5. But you can go around the city of Midgar and go clean it up. Santa's Workshop, $5. That's a nice little festive event. Warhammer 40K. You can go around, I think it's like the hangar bay of a bunch of tanks in the Warhammer 40K universe and go clean them up.
Nice.
$5.
Yeah.
And it's a big ass room. They also added a Back to the Future special pack, which is also go clean the main square of Hill Valley. $5. Go
love
do it. And so this game has been able to maintain a very cheap price tag because you can easily just get the base game. There's like 20 to 30 levels in there already. And then you can go mess around with all this stuff. And what's funny is they've already just recently announced, I believe, so they basically gave us access to the Mushroom Forest and Alice in Wonderland. That's their next DLC pack.
Nice.
That's a lot of shit that you can go and go power wash. So what I'm saying is like, these are little $5 packs, but easily 5-6 hours to 100% clean all of Bikini Bottom. And that's how you keep it cheap, is because you're able to do these packs as DLC and be able to put in the extra effort to make them as awesome as they can be, and it ultimately makes your game better. So at that point, maybe your base game doesn't have to have 60 hours of content. Maybe instead it can have 40, and then you can just add from there.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But overall, final thoughts on that one, Alex, so and we can start wrapping things up for the evening.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been saying it too on this podcast for quite a few years.
Yep.
It's like that this is becoming unsustainable, and I think now's the year we're finally starting to see that come to roost.
What's funny is I've kept this very quiet, but now I can actually say this to you, and you can tell me whether or not I'm crazy. But I've been getting into active discussions about how bad the gaming industry has become financially. And finally, somebody out on Twitter decided to basically challenge me and say, well, what would you do to change it? And he thought that my silence from it was basically me saying that I couldn't do anything about it, and tried to one up me on it. And instead, an hour later, because I literally saw it like 12 hours later, because I don't check Twitter that much, people. I saw his thing, and I literally put up have you ever seen like the stick figure challenge accepted meme that gets shared around?
I don't think I have.
I replied to him with that, with like a little stick figure saying challenge accepted. And I have actually been working over the last 2-3 months, basically building a business plan, theoretically, for how we could do that, but basically be able to have like a big AAA game that can follow that 6 to 9 year gap, but also have smaller projects going on that can help fund that 6 to 9 year project. So maybe something you guys can look forward to in the future, because I actually have gotten so invested into this. I think it's going to be a video, Alex. I think
interesting idea.
Yeah. The internet has provided a couple of interesting ideas for me to go explore on my own time. And now that I'm able to write a little bit more regularly now, I'm actually exploring this, and I think some people on Twitter are going to regret giving me these challenges. I might even bring you and Brenton in on some of them and just like bounce ideas off, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I think in a lot of cases, like, gamers can help fix this problem, and it's through gamers maybe we can find a solution to it. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap things up there. So that is officially putting March of 2024 in the books. Alex, if people want to reach out and ask your various opinions on the things that you have showcased here tonight, or maybe just give you some well wishes, or pester you about what videos you have coming, even though you're too busy recovering from the hellish couple of months you've had, how do they do that, Alex?
I am on YouTube. Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my channel, and yeah, I do hope to get back into the swing of things and get back to making videos soon enough.
What's funny is that I know that you've been working on other things too, so, and a lot of that stuff people can get excited for. All right, and so if people want to reach out to me, you can obviously do so with the usual places. You're obviously on my YouTube channel right now, so you guys can check that out, and also some of the other content that we have going on. Also, if you guys are joining us via podcasting platforms, welcome. We're happy to have you. You can also join us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and Player.fm. So you can join us there as well and be able to have us for your morning or evening, whatever your drive is, because everybody's commute is different. I love podcasts exactly for that, by the way. So you guys can do that, and we will be back for the next month's Geek News. And yes, we are going to be covering the month of April, because a lot of stuff happened there too, and also for May and even going into June, because now June is here, and we're probably going to have a bunch of game announcements that we're probably going to want to get into, right, Alex?
Yeah.
I suspect that we're going to have some big Sega announcements in the next day or two, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But also, if you're going to try and reach out to me on social media, I'm just going to warn you in advance. Given how June worked last year, I'm taking a break from social media in the month of June. I think it's just better for that. Better for everybody's sanity if I just take a break during the month of June and avoid all the Pride Month nonsense from all the companies that don't care. So at that point, if you try to reach out to me at GeekyNRO on Twitter, I'm probably not going to answer you right away. So if you want to submit a story or something like that, go to our email address, which is geekyweek@gmail.com. And that'll go ahead and do it for us. So thank you so much, Alex. Hopefully the recovery continues to go well. Hopefully this year can start evening out from all of the insanity. And we will see you guys next time for the next Geek News reviews and opinions. Until then, take care, my friends. And stay safe. For crying out loud, just stay safe.
Yes, don't be me.